Hi, Hannah. Welcome to What's Your Next podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So happy to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Hannah Brohm. I'm a neuroscientist by training, but also a romance writer. And my debut novel, Love and Other Brain Experiments, just came out 2 weeks ago as of now.
And
And
it's,
I'm very excited to talk about it here.
yes, I guess Flow and Other Experiments married to both your academic background and your
Yeah.
professional background and your romance and put
Yes.
them in a place where you get a little bit of
Yeah,
both.
exactly.
So talk to us about neuroscientist. I learned a lot about it from your book. It was like it's a
Mhm.
newer field. It's a lot of unknown, a lot of new things are learning. What is your area of specialty, and what's your like? How much of your real life was in the academia?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. So I did my PhD in cognitive neuroscience, which is the kind of area of specialty that the book is also mostly set in. So this means that like the intersection between like psychology and human neuroscience to a
yeah,
big part. So it's mostly looking at how things happen or like how things function in the human brain, supporting our cognitive functions such as vision, memory, attention, all of that. And then my particular focus was actually memory, which is something that we see come back in the book. So in that regard, I took what I was very familiar with and embedded the story in that context. So what in the book is, it's not that this is exactly my research, the one that the characters do, but it is very close to the literature I would have been reading for my PhD.
oh my gosh, I love this. Yeah, I'm familiar with the neuroplasticity about your brain,
Mhm.
and I come from a history of trauma, and so a lot of it,
Okay.
we've done a lot of
Yeah.
psychology, different terms of therapy to actually change the chemistry and like to heal it. And so it's fascinating to see how powerful the brain is and how much memory and all the different functions that it does, especially with the cognitive behavioral, the
Mhm.
cognitive and the actual like physical position.
Yeah. Yeah. How that is linked. Yeah, for sure.
Experiences like her even just saying using video games, like using
Yeah.
actual like opportunities to see the science is not doesn't have to be so dry. It can actually be
Mhm.
interactive and it's a really fun way to see that part. So, as someone who had no experience with neuroscience, I thought that this was a great introduction.
Okay, that's great. For me, actually, one of the parts that I always enjoyed in the kind of like scientific field was as part of my PhD, I had to do quite a little bit of teaching as well, like seminars with like undergrad and graduate students as well. And I always really enjoyed trying to break down the kind of concepts or like the things that we do and figure out how to make people understand them because I feel like that's a part of, on the one hand, obviously there's the science, but it's also really important to be able to communicate that and to make sure that people understand what it actually is that we're doing and for what purpose we're doing that. So that was one
Yeah.
of the things that I found really important to embed into the book as well, because I thought it was such a great medium, apart from me being like a huge fan of romance and wanting to write like a romance book to somehow bring that in. So I'm really happy to hear that you found that
I
interesting
do.
and yeah.
And the other aspect that you shared, and I read another book from another academic, I think it's like an academic affair, where you talk about like young academia and how tiring and how hard it is for
Mhm.
young doctorate, postdoc, and not just in the academic field, like in the English, in that book,
Mhm.
but here in the science field, which is you're thinking like, oh my gosh, that's even more mobility.
Yeah.
We see Francis jump around lab to lab,
Mhm.
trying to find grants, trying to find money, networking. So academia is it's a really grueling process.
I think it can. I think there are definitely, I would say maybe for Frances, I took really like the part where she is really determined to find the place where she can do exactly her research and really focus on her questions. I think there are ways maybe to compromise in certain ways so you
Yeah.
don't have to hop around that much. That being said, even then there are like there's a lot of job instability and so on. I do think I maybe took the kind of worst case scenario for her to really punch in that story. And because I was also curious to write a little bit more and explore a little bit more what that would do to a person. So I think there may be more of like success stories or like people that haven't had to move around quite as much as she did. But for sure, it exists. And I also read An Academic Affair. And yeah, I also saw in there, okay, we seem to be quite a few authors like looking at the conditions that academia places on young academics and taking these as a source for romance stories. Yeah.
So I love Frances and Lois. They've known each other for quite some time in their postdoc world, but they've been pen pals. They're not, and they have some animosity. There's some issues that happen as they were pen pals. And by chance, Francis gets placed next to him in the in an airplane going to the seminar, and they realize, oh my gosh, we actually we get a little bit hidden identity, but then we have this sense of no, we actually have something, which is that me cute at the same time. It's who would have thought that person you hated the most, you'll be sitting next to it and transatlantic. So talk to us about your romance journey. What got you? How did you get started?
So maybe I could probably go back a long time, that I've always been a very big reader growing up. Also as a teenager, I used to read a lot of YA contemporary romance as well, then also fantasy, all sorts of things. And I used to write a lot as a teenager as well. So then I wrote mostly vampire stories. So that was the Twilight era. But even back then, I feel like even though it was more the YA age focus, I was already very much into romance. And there were a few books that I read them, like some Sarah Dessen for the first time, and also Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins. There were a few books there that really, they gripped me and they made me feel like butterflies and everything. So I was like, wow, this is what books can be like. That's so cool. So I was always, I would say, into stories that had at least a love story, if not an actual romance, like with a happily ever after in them. But then when I went to university, so I was interested in the writing, but I also wanted to study something else. I was interested in a lot of other things. And then I gave up the writing for a bit. My reading slowed down quite a bit as well, but I still kept on reading. And then at some point, I think just after, maybe a year or so after The Hating Game came out by Sally Thorne, I discovered that. And then I was like, oh, actually, there seems to be like adult romance is also like a super fun genre. And then I feel like it started booming around then also with Christina Lauren and other authors. So I started picking up more of those books. And that was around the time that I was in grad school. And then COVID hit and so on. So I think it was on the one hand discovering that world of books, and at the same time, our world being like slowing down with COVID, not being able to go outside, a lot of instability in that sense. I was in grad school not having the best time because it was very challenging. And then my then boyfriend, we're now married, he moved abroad because he's also an academic. And we had a long distance relationship. So he was in the US, I was in the Netherlands. And then romance became this kind of safe space to be like, oh, maybe not everything is good, but you know that it's going to turn out fine, no matter like the challenges and so on. And then I was reading a few workplace romances around the time. The X Talk by Rachel and Solomon was one of the big ones that I picked up, I think just after it was released as well. The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas that I loved when I still love it, but she self-published it also that weekend. So I picked up these two books more or less back to back. And when I finished reading them, I was thinking like, it's cool to have these protagonists face several challenges in their lives, be really embedded in their world, in their like work context, in that kind of world, and learn a little bit about that in that regard as well, while having this fun story around it. And then I started thinking, okay, that could be cool maybe to play around in my head how I would set a story in the world that I know, which is STEM academia, neuroscience, and where I could see opportunities for a meet cute there, maybe, just a love story that might be a little bit more complicated because you don't know who you're running into. And around that same time, I was also actually working on an academic paper, and I was going through the process that Frances also talks about, which is that you submit your research findings to a journal, and then you get anonymous feedback from other researchers. And I got a lot of feedback, and not all of it was great. Actually, most of it, usually you only get constructive feedback in the best case, sometimes quite like mean comments. That's the norm. And while I was going through that and coming up with answers to that, I was then also figuring out, okay, what is this person that is like really mean to you in that kind of feedback? What if you ended up kind of like randomly meeting them somewhere and they were actually quite a nice person? But you don't know that it's this person. So that's somehow how I then got the idea and started writing Love and Other Brain Experiments in its like very first draft stage. So it took a long journey since then, but that's more or less how it started
And
out.
how do
Yeah.
you juggle both, like having the career, having the postdoc, like that world that is definitely grueling and it's just intense, and then having this time to write and also be well read. Understanding the genre, you have to read the genre or read
Hmm.
other books to get a better sense. How do you juggle it
Yeah.
all?
So I have to say at the moment I'm more focusing on the writing, but
Yeah.
until just a little bit ago, like what I was mostly while I was writing Love and Other Brain Experiments and going through a lot of the edits as well. On the one hand, it just took me a long time. I think in general, I feel like going from the first draft to then get it query ready, get an agent, because I was going through all of these steps as well before we sold the book, because it's my debut, right?
Yeah.
That in general takes a lot of time. And if you're lucky in a way, you might land an agent and a book deal on the first try, but sometimes you don't. So that anyways already took some time. But I also feel like there were time periods in between where I was working much less on the book because I had to finish writing my thesis or because there was a very intense time at the lab. But in general, the way I pushed forward was, on the one hand, the reading was always something I wanted to do because it gave me like a way to switch off at the end of the day, some kind of comfort. Just it has become part of my routine ever since I can remember. So that's something that feels like automatic, even though sometimes I read less than other times, obviously. But the writing became like that as well at some point. Just having the book to go to and taking situations from my academic context, figuring out how they could fit into that story, but then having the control over them, knowing that
Mhm.
I could either make fun of them or turn them into a lighter situation or a cute situation or something like that, was in a way also really helpful with like mental health during grad school. So I think that was actually one of the ways in which I managed to do it next to it, because it became a source of comfort in a way as well. So not just the reading romance, but also the writing romance. Yeah. So it drew
I
me to it. I think that was the most helpful part, actually.
Yeah, I feel like it can be cathartic. Like it could just be like you're
Definitely.
able to control something. Because a lot of times,
Yeah.
academia, I went through a grueling grad work, not in STEM, in another field. And even just working in academia, it's there's so much you cannot control. There's so much that
Yeah.
is out of your control. And so having writing, creating this world, having being able to have the ultimate say or write the characters.
Yeah.
Maybe the characters will tell you, we want to do this, and you're like, okay, baby, I'm gonna put you through the ringer. It can feel very healing in that sense. It
Yeah.
can feel very like actually see it and problem solve it in a way.
Definitely. I feel like that's probably not unique to academia, let's say, as a work context, but I also had the feeling that while in the lead up to publication of this book, I was already also busy with the second book. And
Yeah.
even then I noticed that like you can be nervous. Are people gonna like the book, or are people gonna know about the book at all? So there are so many kind of like questions in your head, or in my head at least, in the lead up to publication. And then again, the other manuscript, even though I didn't have the easiest time writing it,
Yeah.
also again became this kind of world in which you can at least control a few things, or even if they feel out of your control, because as you said, like characters almost decide or like
Yeah.
show you the way, you still know what direction you're going into. And yeah, I think it can be quite healing, as you say, or
Yeah.
comforting after.
Yeah. And the
Yeah,
good news is that they're going to end up happily ever after. We're happy for
exactly,
now.
exactly.
The ending is going to be okay.
Yeah, you have to get them there somehow, but they will end up there.
They will
Yeah.
end up there. Let's talk about your reading life. You mentioned a lot of
Sure.
rom-coms, a lot of romance, a lot of workplace romances, academia, and whatnot.
Yep.
What books are you reading right now, actually?
Okay. Right now, my reading slowed down a lot around
Yeah.
publication
Yeah.
and handing in the draft, because I was very busy with that. But in general, I would say my reading taste broadly is very broad, although it has focused a little bit more romance, especially in the last years, because also, as you said before, you want to know what's going on in romance, what other people are writing, what people like to read, and so on. And I just love romance as a genre. So I always really like to read romance books, but I also do quite fantasy, sometimes some contemporary like literature. What else? I think sometimes some memoirs as well, if I really feel like it, or some kind of like cozy murder mysteries. But the predominant one is usually romance. And the book that I'm reading at the moment is called All in Your Head by Sabina Nordquist. It just came out this week, I think on the 10th of February, if I remember correctly. and it's about a protagonist with idiopathic intracranial hypertension. And she runs into this, or virtually meets this guy in her kind of chronic pain support group. And he turns out to be this like ex-Olympic snowboarder, which she doesn't know. And they make a pact to fake it to get his worried mother off his back.
Yes.
So I'm really enjoying it a lot. It packs like a lot of steam, a lot of tenderness between those two as well. And yeah, has some spoony rep as well,
I
which is
have to
great.
say the meet cute is for the ages. I read this book.
Yes.
I absolutely, because she is a moderator at an online chat, and
Yeah.
he's venting. He has a new disability. He
Yeah.
just came out of like a luncheon, and his mom is in the chat, and she actually tells her like, "I'm just your girlfriend." And what is happening?
What
I
this?
swear-
Yes.
Which actually, it's not your book because
Yeah.
most of them want to be fake dating or anything.
Yes.
So these are good companions, just an FYI.
Yes, for sure. Yes.
So
I would definitely, I'm almost done with it and I don't want it to end. So I would definitely recommend that book.
Yeah.
It's really good.
yes. Oh my gosh. Do you have any other books to recommend or?
Yes.
Okay.
I have other books. I'm always happy to recommend books. So one is called And Then There Was the One.
Yeah.
It's by Martha Waters. I don't know if you know it.
It's a
Yes,
cozy,
okay.
it's an historical mystery, right?
It's like a fun crossover between cozy murder mystery and a rom-com.
Yeah.
And it's set in this, I would say probably like 1930s small English town. And it does a lot of fun twists on murder mystery or cozy tropes like that. There's a lot of tongue-in-cheek writing about Agatha Christie. And when I was a teenager, I read a lot of those kind of like golden age cozy mysteries. So this one was really funny, and it has a very flirty protagonist and a very kind of no-nonsense heroine that I think they bounce off each other very well.
Yeah.
So I love that one. If you want like a little murdery twist without it being super like scary or graphic or anything, like more the cozy kind.
Yeah. That's a good one. I love Martha's actually earlier historical romance or like rom-coms or like funny enough, like she's trying to kill herself for her husband and stuff. And it's a fun one, but I really love that she took on this historical mystery and just include her sense of humor and her like cheek about it. So it's a good one.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, it's really good. Can I recommend a few more? Or?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Go for it.
Great. So then another book that I really enjoyed in the last year was The Friendship Fling by Georgia Stone.
Yes.
Not sure if you've heard of that one.
Actually. So tell me all about it.
Yes. So it's actually, so I know that a lot of rom-coms are funny, but this one actually made me laugh out loud properly.
Yes.
So it's about a grumpy barista who meets a very golden retriever-y customer at a London coffee shop. And he is basically, he doesn't only talk her into being his friend, but almost annoys her into being his friend. And then together they complete this kind of bucket list that he has set out for himself because he knows that he's just going to be in London for the summer. And it's friends to lovers. They think they're just going to be friends while completing that bucket list. But we all know that's not going to happen. And I think it's a very warm, nice London kind of summer heat wave. And just the flirting and banter between these two is really great. And I just really love Georgia's sense of humor as well. So that one is a big recommendation for me as well.
Oh my gosh, I'm adding this one. You have me in London in the summer. Like a fun little travel,
Definitely.
travel.
And I think it works super well because you get the London vibes. If you're not super familiar with London, but even if you have lived here and you're familiar with like, it's not this kind of like super touristy bucket list. There are some elements of that will come back, but there are also elements in there that as someone who lives here are like really fun to read about. And I think that balance is sometimes hard to strike. You really get the feeling, oh, this person just wanted like the very kind of like cliche view of the city. And Georgia lives in London, so yeah, you can trust her to do that as well.
Yes, because that's my biggest pet peeve. I lived in New York for a long time, and a lot of writers write about New York. And your New York take was really good. But
cool.
there are
Thanks.
times I'm like, you're just talking about going to eat at Times Square. I'm like, actually, I really wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate your New York take. I had to say, because that's like my biggest pet peeve. And I was like you took like Columbia. I actually interview a couple of jobs in Columbia, so I'm familiar with the campus and like the area, and I have friends who live in that area and stuff, and just Upper West Side, Morningside Heights, all the area. So it was like a nice little city. My old
cool. Yeah. I used to live around that area, so I lived in New York for just under 2 years.
Yeah,
and I put a lot of the memory box, like a lot of places that I really liked. I put them into the book or kind of alluded to them in the book.
Yes, I appreciate it. And I've been to New York in 6 years. So I'm like, a lot has changed. And that's the part
Yeah.
of New York. Everything changes.
Yeah.
So I love Francis like coming back, just coming back and seeing some of my old friends and seeing some of my new
Yeah.
friends, experience.
It was funny because I started writing it when I wasn't living there yet, when I was just always going back and forth because my partner was living there. So it also became a bit of a way to be close to him when I wasn't there because I had to think about the city and where they were. And then I kept writing as I moved there, and then we moved away and the edit started. So it's this weird progression where now I don't live there anymore, but it is this memory box, as I was saying. And I was back in New York actually 2 weeks ago for the release of the book, and then coming back to it and relating to Francis in that way of, oh, I've been gone for 2 years and now I'm back and things have changed. It's funny to have art imitate life and then imitate art, like just this kind of like circle.
Oh my God. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So, Hannah, tell us where we can find you online.
You can find me online on, I'm going to say, it's probably not all platforms, but first maybe my website is just Hannah Brohm, so my full author name.com. Then on Instagram, you can find me at Hannah Brohm, on TikTok, Hannah.Brohm, and on Threads also Hannah Brohm. So just HANNAHBROHM. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the What to Read Next. For more book lists, cozy reads, and library tips, visit the whattoreadnextblog.com. Your next great read might be waiting there.